There is perhaps no greater question requiring the attention of anthropologists of consciousness, humanistic, transpersonal, and ecopsychologists. In 1988, Terence McKenna suggested a radical theory of human evolution, that entheogens served as exopheromones. McKenna theorized that entheogens acted as a feminizing process on the egoic structures of our personality. Feminizing meaning a cognitive preference of wholeness and synthesis instead of fragmentation, autonomy. And this is a further remembrance that all humans are, from a biological perspective, female first and male second. Thus, where plant entheogens do not occur, or where their use is forbidden, remembering this primordial awareness is prevented from influencing consciousness. The cultural implications of McKenna's thesis initially take shape in personality development and the formation of ego consciousness in mature adults. Psychiatrist Arthur Dykman, in The Observing Self, 1982, referred to this mature ego consciousness as the object self. In support of McKenna and Dykman, I argue that the object self is the foundation of the roots of patriarchy and the subsequent genderization of nature. She, Gaia, must be controlled by the dominator consciousness of patriarchy, because to free her or us would liberate us from the political, social, and psychological power structures of the object self. All this assists in my inquiry of the broad question I ask: what are the social factors that cause us to forget the primordial tradition? I argue that the institutionalization of the object self and dominator consciousness is kept in place by Euro-American science's patriarchal power structure, which then subsequently influenced our scientific methodology. The specific tool of oppression enforcing dominator consciousness then subjugates cognition in an assumption about reality we accept as true beyond question: our belief in scientific objectivity. Precise, impartial, emotionally detached observation of dead, mechanically interacting matter. This is the essence of scientific objectivity, a paradigm that has directly contributed to humankind's dissociation from nature. I've called it the Night of the Living Dead model. Hence, I have invited us to break the habits of cognition that hold this paradigm in place in Reflections on Albert Hoffman's Epistemology of Consciousness. Christian Retsch has referred to this entheogen-inspired primordial remembrance as a cognitive liberation induced by exogene neurotransmitters. This primordial remembrance via entheogens is why this experience is feared and forbidden by the dominator power structure, because it is essential to breaking the habits of cognition. Of course, some of this is probably old news to those of you that read anthropology news. So then let's be clear about the theme of this conference, and if you would be reading, you would already know I've said all this before. So therefore, here we are going into founding the Association of Ecopsychology, whose home I hope to find in APA's Division 32 Humanistic Psychology. And likewise, I hope, again, as I repeated earlier tonight, that there is a focus group within SAC and the concerns of primordial anthropology. Now, some would find it strange or merely coincidental, as I said earlier, that we are at this juncture at this particular point. And so, who knows about all that, if it's just coincidence or if it's some echo of cosmic creation. We won't know until we find a way to test all these far-out theories, and the first step toward doing this is to begin asking the right questions, forming the right hypotheses, and designing experiments with the proper controls that will give us the intellectual tools to forge this new science. We are at a juncture that has been referred to as the death of Balder. This is a conversation I had with Houston Smith in 2004 until some less than polite individual pushed me from behind and told me I had to be on my way. I'll leave him nameless. But Houston and I agree that the death of Balder does represent this idea of the death of nature and the death of our aesthetic appreciation of the natural world. It is also the beginning of the Ragnarok, the beginning of the end of times. And it is that which has been characterized as a battle between the forces of nature, the forces of wind and storms and all of that that is battling with the peoples of the earth, who are then trying to reconcile these two forces against each other until the moment of the new green earth, which is always a consequence of a volcano. Because after a volcano, there is a regreening from all of the ash. So then, as a quick, and I'll let David Lukoff go next, as a quick crash course on what to do about this new methodology. Rituals to remember and create transpersonal ecological consciousness. Briefly, ritual is both a means of remembering and a means of providing a context for community alliances and facilitates enculturation, and is thereby a key component in both fostering and maintaining transpersonal ecological consciousness. The theoretical development of an ecopsychological perspective postulates 1. An increased identification of our personality as fundamentally connected and co-evolving with the living creatures of the earth, the cosmos, and all forms of culture. 2. An increased awareness that our actions or decisions affect the present and future growth, health, and well-being of all existence. And 3. The consequences of postulates 1 and 2 will result in an increase of our actions of environmental and humanistic ethics motivated by our meta-motivation or being needs. On the other hand, this question that remains to be answered is what kinds of experiences are able to shift our awareness so profoundly? This question invites the relevance of entheogenic experiences. So imagine a wheel, or imagine a circle, because we don't have it up there because it's not available. And there it is. It's divided into 3 parts. So in one part, we have rituals to create alternate or transpersonal states of consciousness. These rituals serve as a means of awakening to higher aspects of ourselves. And this is where our stories come from the alternate states that we get into. We've heard a lot about that. We've heard about pilgrimages to sacred places in nature. We've heard about those that are forms of meditation, shamanic journeying, somatic ritual religious experiences, or metanoia and ingesting sacred plants. All of these are part of the getting into contact with the very essence, the very core, the very source of religious awareness. Without that, nothing else is going to stimulate your legendary stories and myths, because you will not be tapping into the very source of the archetypal singularity from which we were born. Ritual, then, to facilitate community healing that promote a social psychological emphasis to mend the fragmentation of self, society, and the non-human world, without sewing things back together, without bringing us back into ourselves and bringing us into community alignment. The stories alone will one day just be an echo, or no longer even be able to be articulated because we will have forgotten them. So therefore we need these rituals that Joanna Macy and John Seed refer to as the Council of All Beings. Ralph Metzner calls this the process of remembering our animal ancestors. We need Sidney Girard's call for a self-disclosure. We need David Bohm's remembrance of the process of dialogue. And we also need drumming circles that we had at the beginning of our particular event right here. These kinds of things are able to activate a means of coming together and sewing us up as a group, and thereby healing us in a way that sustains the legends that come from the source of all things. Then, rituals that celebrate rites of passage. One more.
I think there's a bunch of us who want to speak and maybe...
All right.